Hello and welcome to Call to Arms, and thank you very much for answering the call. We are joined tonight by Mr. Brian Seipp. How are we, Brian?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you so much for being on, mate, and giving me your very valuable time. So the reason I've got you on is because I hear you're a wee bit of a Votann aficionado, and yeah, I really want to pick your brains with how you're finding the new codex, the new faction that we've just released. So we're going to be kind of deep diving into that, so that'll be really fun. And it's great to have you on and obviously get your thoughts because very competent tournament level player. I believe, am I right in saying you've just been picked for Team Scotland for 40k?
Yeah, lucky enough to get picked auto qualify, in fact, so I didn't even have to sweat whether I make it or not, which was nice. Playing a bunch of the Space Dwarves online since they're spoiling rather early. It's been a lot of fun. Learned a
Good.
lot.
Yeah, TTS is a wonderful thing, right? So being able to get all those reps in so quickly, so early, really good. But yeah, it means that a lot of players have been able to get a feel for the army, even though we're only just getting kind of their main wave of models coming out. So really good to see. So before we dive in any further, just first of all, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out immensely, and yeah, just kind of gets the channel content out there. And also thanks to the sponsors as well, tabletopminis.co.uk, and please use Riath and his lovely shop up in Aberdeen for any of your minis needs. You're getting some decent discount off of RRP, and if you're a patron, you get additional discount as well. So yeah, check it out, guys. Right, so without further ado, Brian, let's get right into tonight's show. So let's do it. So obviously we're talking about Leagues of Votann. So a brand new faction to the game. They quite a controversial entry into the 40k universe, would we say?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that when an army has to be nerfed before the models are released, that's a sign that a little controversy there.
Correct. So yeah, we've I think this must be a first, right? We've had a pre-release changes, quite kind of wide changes to the faction, because yeah, it looked as if the main kind of response from the scene was this faction is way too overpowered.
Yeah, absolutely. The army, when it first came out, was arguably the strongest army that's ever been printed in Warhammer 40k. It's up there with Drukari when they first came out, and really even when you compare it to something like Drukari, the only reason that that's comparable is because of how weak all the other codexes were. This was that level of difference between the strength of this book, but against most armies having up-to-date codexes, which is pretty mind-boggling when you think about it.
Wow. No, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we saw that there was main rules changes to the abilities. We also saw complete changes to all of the points for every single unit in the army as well. Everything going up, and I think roughly kind of added maybe about 20% or thereabouts to each unit. Is that about right?
Yeah, give or take. Depends on which one you're doing. I know my
Mhm.
army that I had originally written went up by 500 points when I got the new points update, so that was about a 25% increase. We've had some people went up 600 points, some people only 3 or 4, but roughly speaking, about 20% up on everything. About accurate.
Yeah, and obviously it depends what list you were rocking. If you were going for the land fortresses, they saw quite a considerable increase. If you were going for a lot of the Hearthguard as well, I think they saw quite considerable increases as well. So yeah, no, I think that was big changes. But before we get into to kind of or maybe even talk about whether or not we think that was the what we think it was maybe the right changes or what that's kind of done to the army. We're just going to kind of unpack the army a wee bit, okay? So we're going to be talking about the detachment abilities first of all. So pretty straightforward in here. We've got the Hero of the Oath band, which means that you can only include a maximum of one Cal model in each detachment. So pretty standard. I think they're kind of doing that in all the armies in 40k. You know, you can only have one captain, you can only have one commander, you know, Tau and stuff like that. So so that's pretty standard. Now with this, am I right in saying, Brian, that you can kind of circumvent this? Because I've heard some chat about this online. That can you circumvent this if you take a regular Cal and a high Cal? If you like upgrade one to the high Cal, can you then take both of them in a detachment?
Yeah, so it's the high call to or call to high call is kind of akin to captain to a chapter master, and I guess as a bit of a nod to the limited data sheets that are available in the Votann range, they're allowing you to, as long as you take one call as a high call, you can kind of double up in a detachment, which is quite nice.
Cool. No, nice, nice, and it's nice to know that that kind of a little thing that you can do. And then in terms of that, obviously we've got League Customs, and that's just a kind of your usual sub-faction kind of ability. So you've got quite a few different things to choose from within the book. You can also make your own custom kind of sub-faction as well. So kind of akin to your Eldar or your kind of Gene Stealer cults, you can pick and choose whatever ones you kind of fancy as well. So a wee bit of a good kind of space there to tweak and do a variety of different things. If we just go straight down then to, so we're just going to skip past the leagues because we'll all come back to that point. We're going to go down to, here we go. Yep, so the actual rules of the army, and these, well, one of the abilities was quite hotly contested, and that's why I think it had to change. So we'll kind of very quickly just kind of rattle through. So obviously, again, similar to most other 40k armies, if you pick your league, your sub-faction, all your units will then get that sub-faction keyword, and that means that they can obviously work within the kind of the rules of that sub-faction. We've got some a new weapon profile as well, which is quite cool. So we've got Hunter. Weapons. So as it says, many ranged Votann weapons have the type Hunter, and you've got like Hunter then a number, and it just means that that's how many shots that they got. So this was interesting because we've not really seen much of this. Everything's usually either rapid fire, assault, heavy, pistol. So what do you think about this? Like bringing in a whole new kind of weapon type.
So I think this was a bit of a consequence of Games Workshop kind of designing themselves into a corner. They didn't have a kind of generic weapon. That's what hunter weapons are. You know, they don't suffer negatives for shooting into combat if they're eligible to do so, but they can't advance and shoot them. They don't have double shots at long range. You know, there's kind of like the ups and downs. It's just if you imagine if you were to create a generic weapon where it's just this many shots attached to the weapon at that range, that would be what a hunter weapon is. There's not really any special rules associated with them.
Perfect. No, that's a really good explanation, man. Yeah, cool. So it's just it is what you get. So yeah, we're not getting any kind of minuses to shoot by moving and stuff like that. You know, akin to the heavy, the penalties and what have you, or the losing shots with rapid fire and all that kind of stuff. So that's pretty cool. And then in terms of the abilities, so the Votann's their big thing, so it's Eye of the Ancestors, and this is where these judgment tokens come into play. So there's a lot of different scenarios in which you can put these things called judgment tokens onto enemy units. So each time an enemy unit destroys a Votann unit, they gain a judgment token. Each time an enemy unit successfully completes an action or a psychic action, they get a judgment token. And at the end of each of your opponent's turns, you can select one enemy unit within range of an objective marker that your opponent controls, and that unit gains a judgment token. Okay. Now there are other ways that units can gain judgment tokens. We'll talk about the Cals and the high Cals and things like that a wee bit in the near future. But in terms of that, that's pretty much it. We've got some stratagems available to us as well, I believe, to give out judgment tokens also.
Yeah, there's some stratagems. There's some ways you can kind of glare at people and give them tokens if you want to. But generally speaking, you know, kind of the shorthand way of describing how you get a judgment token is if you have the audacity to change the scoreboard at all, you're going to get a judgment token. You know, stand on that objective, kill a unit, do an action, you're getting a judgment token.
Love it, yeah. So it's just the Space Wars grumbling at you, basically. Love it. I think also must be mentioned. So we've got is that another guest host we've got on the channel as well, there, Brian?
Yeah, it's my cat trying to eat models behind me. I'm laying them down so they don't show on the banners.
Perfect. So we've got judgment tokens. Now, am I right in saying that judgment tokens they last for the battle? Is that right?
Yep, once you get stuck with one, you have it until you are dead. And spoilers, you're gonna die.
If this army can see you, you are dead. I think is the common theme that keeps coming up. Um, so so yeah, so um, so that's fine. So even if they're removed from the battlefield and come back on, they still have it. So that's quite a key thing to know as well. There's no way of getting these things off you. And yeah, so what everyone really wants to know is, well, what's the point of having judgment tokens? Well, the point is, if depending on the number of judgment tokens you have, you are going to be getting auto wounded on a certain number to hit when you roll to hit. So you've got one judgment token on you, every 6 to hit is an auto wound. If you've got 2 judgment tokens on you, every 5 to hit is a mortal, or 5 or 6, 5 plus is an auto wound. And if you've got 3 judgment tokens, every roll of a 4-up gets you to an auto wound. So basically 50% of your shots should just go straight to wounds.
Yeah, it's quite strong, especially when you start to look at some of the, I guess what we usually classify as small arms fire, things like bolters and stuff like that. If you're wounding something which you would normally wound on a 6, but suddenly you just need a 4-up to hit it, and then you auto wound, it becomes a lot more interesting. So I have a lot of these kind of high rate of fire weapons.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and it turns your smaller, maybe your kind of more troops units that have, yeah, as you say, just got a smattering of kind of bolter strength level fire. It means that they can actually take down bigger prey. Yeah, so that's quite nice. Now this was the kind of the kind of contention, because there are a few other abilities within the book where if you roll I would say that's 6 to wound, you can then do things like mortals and things like that. So they then have stipulated that if you roll the kind of the auto wounds and what have you, they then can't then trigger the kind of those values to wound. Is that right?
Yeah, so you might have seen a mechanic like this before when you're playing against elves or Eldar, where you have Hail of Doom, where you have these shuriken weapons, and shuriken weapons are 6s to hit, 6 of the wounds, excuse me, are extra AP, and they kind of slice through you, right, with their communion wafers. Well, the Votann had a similar ability, and just like the Eldar, there's a lot of synergies, mostly in the form of stratagems and other abilities that kind of trigger on 6s to wound. And so originally, when this was printed, every one of these judgment abilities where they auto hit on the value counted as a 6 to wound, and that quickly got out of hand. So that was one of the nerfs that they actually brought in kind of before the army was fully released to help kind of bring it down in line with everybody else.
Yeah, no, well put. So with this change, so we've already said, yep, this is a very strong ability. This is going to make the shooting within the army and even the small arm shooting pretty deadly. And yeah, these judgment tokens do not go away, so you just keep stacking them on things, and there's abilities to get multiples, abilities to count as if an enemy unit's got more judgment tokens than what they actually have. There's stratagems available to hand these out as well. So this is going to be the main kind of engine behind the army. So with the change, obviously, to how it interacts with those kind of 6s to wound mechanics, and with the points increases, was there any other changes pre-release that kind of affected the army?
Yeah, those were the major. So the only rule change was that what we mentioned, and then of course the points. And the points significantly modified things in terms of how the army is structured, as you would expect with a change like that. But otherwise, the rules have been remained, pretty fixed. So which is great because you don't see the army change too much from first printing, so you can kind of get used to it. Rely on the book that you spent a bunch of money to get.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. And with that, what is your verdict on the changes? So we're going to, I said kind of before, we're going to chat about, do we think the changes were warranted? Do we think it was a good change? Do we think it was too far? What's your kind of first take on the changes?
So the points generally, I think, are pretty good. The things they raised points on needed to be raised. I think that bikes probably should have gone up 10 instead of 5, and the Terminator should have gone up 5 instead of 10. But beyond that, I'm pretty much okay with it. it's a lot harder to write a list, and it kind of makes it's still a very strong army. The part I'm not a big fan of is how they chose to address the sixes to hit auto wound mechanic. I agree it was a bit too strong, but it felt a bit lazy. Kind of like a broad stroke to simplify this and solve this problem. I think there could have been a better ways, like maybe only sixes to hit would trigger the sixes to wound or something. It removed a number of synergies that were quite interesting. Admittedly, too powerful when you started really accumulating judgment tokens, but hopefully they'll revisit that sometime in the future and figure out a slightly more elegant way of controlling it.
Yeah, no, that's sounds good. Cool. So, in terms of the army, still overall happy. Clearly, you must be because you're still wanting to play them and get games into them. So yeah. So now what we're going to do. Then we've kind of covered, and that's pretty much it, isn't it? In terms of the overall rules. Oh no, sorry, my apologies. It's not totally over because we still have other abilities as well. So we've still got Magna Rail, Steady Advance, and Void Armor. So I think Void Armor is one of probably the quickest ones to go over. Essentially, they have Armor of Contempt, so they're reducing all AP from weapons by 1, and you cannot re-roll a wound roll against them. So they're basically salamanders. Is that right?
Yep, salamanders, iron warriors, factions that you have to completely dedicate yourself to. Every Votann is one of them, so they just get it straight off the mark, and that's everything in the book has this rule. Even the we'll get to them later, but the berserkers, which are basically shirtless, crazy people, um, benefit from void armor.
Yeah, love it. Cool. And even the vehicles as well benefit from this. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's really potent when you start to get some of the heavier vehicles with the no reroll to wounds. Less common to reroll the damage roll, but the wound roll as a I'd play Tau as one of my other main factions. Incredibly potent into them.
Yeah, and I was like, I never even mentioned that, yeah, as well. So can't even re-roll the damage either. So yeah, it's pretty awesome. We've then got Steady Advance. So for these boys, we don't roll to advance. We just get 3 inches, unless they have the accelerated keyword, in which case they add 6 inches to this. How big have you kind of seen this? How big has this been in your games, basically, to not have to roll?
It's huge. The having it be deterministic is incredibly helpful. You can plan your turns perfectly. You know that you know how far you need to go in order to put a banner or to get behind a wall. You don't have to rely on the variability of an advance roll, um, which is massive. And there's a number of accelerated things in the game, which most of the vehicles and things like bikes and having an auto six for that is quite incredible. And it's also worth mentioning the other bullet point, which comes up frequently, which is that in addition to this fixed advance roll, you can't have your move modified by anything, um, which means force you don't care about them. -2 to charge from Tau, you don't care. There's nothing Changlefoot grenades, you don't care. You just ignore all those kind of cool rules that people use to slow you down or trip you up. Your little dwarf legs keep pumping, and you get the distance you thought you're going to go.
Love it. So basically, dwarfs on speed. You know, they've teched in some kind of there's some elf technology looks like for their stuff. You know, getting the auto advance 6. It's awesome.
Very dangerous over short distances.
Natural sprinters. So yeah, cool. So that's Steady Advance. We've then got Magna Rail. So I think this has got quite a bit of love. So it says some Votann weapons have the Magna Rail ability. Each time an attack is made with such a weapon, you cannot take invuln saves, and on an unmodified wound roll of a 6, excess damage that weapon inflicts is not lost. Instead, keep allocating excess damage to another model in the target unit until either all the excess damage has been allocated or the target unit is destroyed. So if you're able, with one of these Magna Rail weapons, to really pop off that 6 to wound, you could do a heinous amount of damage with some of these things, especially on the bigger vehicles, the Hecaton. They've got a big old Magna Rail, sorry. So you really could either use this to take out enemy vehicles, heavy armor, or you can just pop that unit of 5 things on 2 wounds each, you know, potentially as well. If they had an invuln, they don't have an invuln anymore, and you're just causing that spillover damage, right?
Yeah, it's really powerful, and this is one of the rules which really the synergies we mentioned with the way the rule used to exist for Judgment of the Ancestors, auto wounding on 6s, and one of the reasons it had to be nerfed. hitting on a 4 and triggering the auto wound on a 6, the spillover with a magna rail rifle, which the lightest version of this is something like AP4 D3 plus 3 damage, is pretty brutal. One shot can just murk an entire unit of guys. That's pretty brutal. So it's still quite strong. There are a couple ways to get that wound roll of a 6 deterministically, and sometimes you just hit those 6s, and then it's pretty exciting and fun. You hit that 6, and suddenly the weapon becomes a lot more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we'll maybe talk about one or two ways in which we can make sure we get those 6s to wound in the book. And then I think last but not least, we have beam. Okay, so this is interesting. So we've got these beam weapons that we have access to. So I want to say it's pretty straightforward. We've kind of seen something similar. I believe it's Mortarion has a kind of a beam weapon, and if itself you draw that line, you can target every unit along that line, and that's pretty much it. Is that as complicated as it gets?
Somewhat. There's some nuance to it. But yeah, the Mortarion's Pistol of the Lantern does something similar. Tau have a system that they can use that does it for a fusion gun. We've seen it before, but we've always ever seen it on really short range weapons, and not very commonly spread throughout the army. Maybe one unit would have it. Votann have it en masse, so you can really start to see it pop up all over the place, and it's a lot harder to prevent yourself getting hit by these beam weapons with multiple units, when you have it in 3 or 4 different places on the battlefield. Um, and Also, when the range of it, instead of being 12 inches, can be up to 34 inches for certain weapons. Um, it's incredibly strong. Once if you are shooting one unit with a weapon that's high strength and damage, and suddenly you're picking up 3 units with that one shot, it can be quite strong. Forces your opponent to really kind of be on their game, trying to keep an eye out for it. Couple ways you can kind of get around it. As you beam over things, each beam weapon kind of you check the beam every time you roll the next weapon. So, for example, Land Fortress has 5 weapons that can have up to 5 weapons that have the beam rule. You would fire one, you'd resolve its shots, then resolve the beam weapon over whatever beamed over, and then you would draw the beam again to the units. So say you're shooting a unit of 5 and you killed a couple guys, that beam line might be different because now you've always beamed to the closest point from your model to the closest point in that unit, and so that can change as you're doing beams, which can be quite interesting.
No, that is interesting. A very good point as well to note that, yeah, you're not just fast rolling at all the beams in one go. You have to do that one at a time. So no, very, very good point. Perfect, right. So I think that's us in terms of all the rules that the Votann get in general. And as Brian has quite well put, yeah, very potent and can put out quite a bit of damage. So let's look at we're going to start diving into the sub factions and kind of what's kind of taken your fancy in terms of the list you've been running. So we're going to look at some sub factions. We're going to be looking at the units as well, and possibly just maybe a couple of the combos that we think are probably going to see more often than not on the tournament tables. So I think we had a wee chat before this, and the one that has taken both of our fancies. I know that when I saw this, I immediately was just like, yes, chunky boys, and big tanks. Was the is it Ymir or Ymir conglomerate, however you want to pronounce it, as the league. And yeah, so this is one that I quite like. You've also said that this is your kind of league of choice. So talk to us about it. So why have you decided that this is the one I'm going to put my stamp on?
So Ymir, or that's how I pronounce it, at least might be wrong. But the Ymir rules are uh, generally strong. So the relic gives you, or the league custom gives you 2 abilities. It's kind of common throughout these different customs. First one is you add 4 inches to the range of every weapon you have. Um, there are some hilarious things that happen with this. First off, I mean, you get longer range with your beam weapons. Your basic guns become 28 inches. That's quite strong. Amusingly, your grenades go from 6 inches to 10 inches, which I always find hilarious. But that extra range comes in huge because some beam weapons are fairly short. at 18 inches, and now you're looking at 22 inches, and that makes a big difference in terms of being able to capture the unit you want or keep the enemy at the distance you want while continuing to hit them. And then the second ability is your entire army gets a 5-up invuln save. And if you have a 2-up armor save, you get a 4-up invuln save. And I know you might be thinking, yeah, well, it's not really super important if you have armor contempt, but you're not Space Marines. You frequently only have 4-up armor saves for your regular guys, or you, in the case of those shirtless berserkers I mentioned, have a 6-up armor save. And now suddenly you're deflecting a third of all incoming fire at the absolute worst case. It's pretty strong. A lot of units which seem like they should die very quickly suddenly start sticking around, and you start to layer a couple buffs and things that make you survivable on top of each other, and these units become really hard to shift. Which, with those point changes, it's pretty important because you start to have a much more elite army than you had before.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yep. Yeah, I've got to admit it was the invulns that immediately made me kind of take note. It just seems so strong, as you said, to give that just blanket 5-up on everything in the army, and then your chunkier stuff, So there's quite a few 2-up saves. There's obviously we've got the land fortress, we've got the hearth guard, so basically the Terminator, the dwarf Terminator guys, and the one of the characters as well. It's got a 2-up save as well, so it's pretty decent to give them the 4-ups, and then also, as you said, the extra range just comes in clutch as well. So yeah, really like this league just for those options alone. Let's talk about their own specific warlord trait, strat, and relic. So again, warlord trait, really nice if you want to put this on a quite a damaging character. Now, I believe that this was one of the ones that people were eyeing up for I think it was the Brokir Iron Master to get him triggered in, what was it, the kind of the 4 mortals, was it, on his shots. If he did the auto hits, then he would get the extra damage. But now with the rules, has that kind of changed that?
Yeah, so there was, I think some people believe that you could add this warlord trait on. Well, so the Berkir, give a short synopsis. Berkir's Iron Master is kind of this like tech marine like model in the faction, and he has a graviton rifle, which allows you to, damage 2. It becomes higher damage against better armor, and on 6 is the wound. With, I believe, one of his upgrades that he can take, he deals mortals instead. And so another synergy that was coming into play with that before the nerf was, you'd have those 6s, 5s, 4s to hit, depending on the judgment tokens, and you'd be doing a ton of mortals to people. And so you'd attach this warlord trait to do extra damage to it, and suddenly you're doing 3 mortals every time you hit them, instead of just doing the 2. I think there was a bit of confusion on people thought that you would do 4 against people with good armor save, but actually checks for the armor save after you've already converted the mortals. So it'd be 1 less, but still it was quite effective. I mean, 3 mortals with every hit on 4-up is pretty brutal.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. So we've kind of removed that, which I think probably, yeah, a good thing. That's a lot of mortal wounds at range. And now, do we still see this as being a serviceable warlord trait? For example, I've maybe had some thoughts of sticking this onto the Einherjar Champ, which is can take his mass hammer up to some quite high damage, or do we think we're kind of moving past this now?
I think it's interesting. I think it's still interesting on the Forge Master, because it makes all of his weapons extra damage. So it makes his hammer go from damage 2 to 3, and his gun going from damage 3 to 4 on things with a high armor save. Even if you're not getting the mortals, it's still AP 3, and that with the extra 4-inch range, you become a 22-inch range gun that shoots 3 shots at damage 4 against high armor targets. It's a pretty great anti-tank weapon. You still benefit from the auto wounding on grudge tokens. So say you're shooting that at a knight, you have 4 damage shots into a knight. 3 of them you can knock out half of its wounds just by rolling 4s to hit, which can be quite strong. I don't know that you still take it because well, frankly, there are a couple other warlord traits and relics that are better, especially for the Forge Master, which we'll get to probably in a second. but also the stratagems in this army are insane. And so you want to save your CP to be able to use them.
Yeah, and obviously in an Nephilim world that we're in, yeah, so we really need to be, yeah, picking and choosing where we're spending those CP to, yeah, because obviously, as you say, we might forgo some amazing strats. One such strat, perhaps, is Pulsed Beam Discharge. So we've got 1 CP, so this is purely for this league. So use the strategy when you're shooting phase. When an Emir conglomerate unit from your army is selected to shoot, select one model in that unit and then select one beam weapon that it is equipped with. Till the end of that phase, each time a hit is scored with that weapon, the target suffers 1 mortal wound in addition to the normal damage. So we're putting out mortals at range. Thoughts on this one, Brian?
It's one of my favorites. So it's one of the reasons to do Ymir actually. So the land fortresses that you've probably heard so much about, one of my favorite ways to build them is using what's one of the main turret weapon called a conversion beamer. And you might remember conversion beamers from different maybe dreadnoughts or stuff like that. I believe they keep this pattern relatively true when they're using them, where if you're beyond a certain range, kind of if you're at long range, if you will, then suddenly they get extra hits or they become more powerful as they go. And that's true for this conversion beamer too. It's a 30-inch gun, 34 in Ymir. It's a beam weapon, which means it hits everything in between. And if you're over 15 inches away, so if you're kind of in that half or that long range version of it, then every hit you make counts as 2. And that's important with this stratagem because if you're hitting something over 15 and you roll 2 dice to get 2 hits, suddenly you have 4 hits, and this stratagem for 1 CP did 4 mortal wounds to the target in addition to its normal damage, which can be quite strong.
Nice. No, I like that. Yeah. So yeah, a couple of very good points there to make for that for the obviously the weapon and how it interacts with the strat as well. So nice, really really good. One thing we didn't touch on was I believe there's is there a way, so when I remember reading this, so the extra range that Ymir gives, is there not a way that, oh yeah, sorry, it's the ancestral judgment, isn't it? So if you're shooting at a unit that's got 1 or more judgment tokens and it's within half range, you get an extra AP on the weapons as well.
Yeah, so every one of the League customs come with this kind of ancestral judgment. It's this unique way that they interact with judgment tokens. And Ymir has one of the strong ones as well. And that's, as you said, if you're shooting something within half range and has a judgment token, your weapon gets an extra AP. That means that your basic guns might go from AP 1 to 2. Your big weapons, like the beam weapon I mentioned, go from AP 3 to AP 4, which can be quite deadly. Um, and what's also pretty cool is with, especially in the case of the conversion beamer, is the conversion beamer specifically says if you're over 15 inches away. And the weapon goes to 34 inches, which is the sweet spot where you have 15 to 17 inches, where you get the extra AP and the extra shots, which is quite nice to get into.
Yeah, I was doing the math in my head there, and I was like, oh my god, like, so how have you found in your games, basically playing to that sweet spot? Have you found it pretty manageable to make sure that you're within there reliably?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I think you'll quickly find with this army is the best way to play it is to just put your stuff on the line, especially the land fortresses, and then just push at your opponent. So you will frequently find yourself in the range you need to be, um, where you kind of have that 15 to 17-inch bracket that you can really exploit. And you can use the fact that you're a vehicle and that you're trying to get these beam lines we talked about to kind of move in ways that get you 17 in that bracket away, but get you a good angle to shoot the target.
Nice. No, I like that. Very good. And then last but not least, we've got a relic for the league as well. So it's called the Last Crest of Jaluk or Yaluk, and it's a shield crest model only. Once per battle before making a saving throw, it can activate the relic. If it does so, to the end of the phase, the bearer has a 3-up invuln save, and each time the bearer would lose a wound as a result of a mortal wound, it's a 4-up shrug basically on that. Not really probably going to be wasting points on that.
No, not really. There are a couple interesting relics. Unfortunately, this really isn't one of them. I mean, it's neat. Um, and I can see value in a 3-up invuln save. Grey Knights have something similar. It's strong. Warburg as Mortals is great. all can speak to that. But there are just better things you can be doing it through CP. I mean, the pulse beam discharge strat, for example, would be a better use of that.
No, yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Okay. So that's Ymir. So in terms of, so I know that that's kind of the one that we've kind of both planted our flags on. We think maybe one of the top ones, certainly. Is there any other ones that you think are still pretty strong? For me, the Grand Thurian League I've been kind of looking into as well. Seems to be quite good to be able to count the judgment tokens as higher than what it is. Anything else that's kind of worth a shout out in the sub factions?
So Thurian League's pretty cool. It's worth mentioning they get the one named character in the book who is quite powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a reason to take them alone. There's also I believe it's Kronos Hegemony. Probably pronouncing that wrong. But they're essentially Bloody Rose, and I don't know if you've played against Sisters of Battle, but that's pretty good. And frankly, all the factions are generally pretty good. There's an argument that you could make to take any one of them. When a faction, which is essentially, as I said, Bloody Rose, is maybe your third or fourth best sub faction, it's a good sign that you've got some depth there. So, they've done a good job here.
Yeah, a really good point there. Me and Simon were having a chat last night about basically how it's a lot of 40k is just you take the best thing and that's it, and there's nothing that really kind of comes close. Obviously, Sisters of Battle, Bloody Rose just seems to be the thing that everyone's taken. So yeah, the fact that you've got access to that, but there's even better things in here. Yeah, that's a very good point. So perfect. So let's move on. Let's talk about. Before we do actually, any play in the custom leagues? Because sometimes I've found that so for example, Genestealer Cult, I think they've seen quite a bit of success not going for one of the main sub factions. It's where you can actually customize your own. Have you found or seen any sort of combinations with the custom leagues that makes that viable?
Some interesting combinations. It's worth mentioning you get both the trait as well as choosing an ancestral judgment ability, so you don't miss out on that. Unfortunately, what you do miss out on is the stratagem, and the stratagems you get with these factions are very strong, as kind of a theme you'll find in this entire book. The stratagems are being very good, so it's hard to argue why you should do that and lose out on those stratagems.
Yeah, good point. Perfect. There we go. Okay, cool. So let's talk about some warlord traits. Okay, so you were kind of saying there's a couple of warlord traits that seem to be a bit strong. So what are we thinking in terms of what you're going to give your general?
So there's usually, so the way I've been taking there's a couple of different combinations, let me phrase it like that, and they pair well with the relics, which is nice. So I'm gonna probably subvert a little bit and talk about both of them. One combination which is quite fun is you take the Einhir champion, who has this giant hammer. You combine the warlord trait Warrior Lord, which allows you to reroll all wounds, and the ability to ignore face caps and feel no pain, quite strong, with a relic that allows them to change his hammer to damage D3 plus 3. This is called
The
Exactor,
Oh,
which is a super cool name. So it's double strength, AP3, D3 plus 3 damage, and every unmodified hit roll of a 6 does D3 plus 3 mortal wounds instead. That's pretty good. So then, even if your mortal wounds don't get through, you're still getting past face caps, or if you do get mortal wounds, getting past face caps. It's a nice combination. That's kind of like, in my opinion, more of a fun way of having a cool guy. I think the most powerful combination is to take a high call, or a call, excuse me. You can use a high call as well, but I usually just take a call. You give him a long list. A long list has 3 bullet points to it. It's quite a beefy warlord trait. So first off, each time the warlord makes a range attack, the target doesn't get cover. That's nice. Each time you select a target for Warlord's ranged weapons, you can ignore Lookout Sir. If it has one or more judgment tokens, turns into a bit of a sniper. Pretty good. And the one that's most relevant I find frequently is at the end of each phase, if an enemy had a judgment token that was destroyed by a league unit in your army, you can select one enemy unit that is visible to this guy and give them a judgment token. So he kind of hears the screams of the enemies, glares at the enemy in the distance, and says, "You're now judged." And that's super useful to kind of juggle these tokens around as you start to get maximum value. You know, give one to somebody at the end of their turn for being on an objective, kill that unit, pop it over to something else to use in combat. So you kind of get the benefit in multiple phases. Can be quite strong. So the call has a ranged weapon that is 4 shots, strength 4, AP 1, 1 damage. First 2 bullet points, ignore cover, sniping. It's okay. It doesn't really pair too well with it, right? But if you combine it with the relic, which is called Grudge's End, which allows you to upgrade any one of its weapons, any bolt weapon, excuse me, to give it an extra damage and an extra AP, and every time you hit a unit with a judgment token, it automatically wounds. So now suddenly you have this character who has 4 shots at strength 4, AP 2, 2 damage with all of its shots, or if you're within half range at 12 inches, AP 3, that can snipe characters from 24 inches away, and every time it hits against the guy with the judgment token, automatically wounds. That means that you're wounding knights on hit rolls of 2. So 4 shots at damage 2. It can be quite strong, and you get to really get some good value out of killing your characters. And he's up there sniping characters while moving judgment tokens around. You get a lot of value out of him throughout the course of the game.
Wow, no, I really like that. Yeah, so basically recycling judgment tokens, because usually when you kill that unit, those tokens are gone, right? But he's just able to boop, take them off those things you've just killed, and you, as you already said, you're going to be killing a lot, and taking them off and just sticking them onto new units. I really like that. And yeah, just the kind of the waves of kind of interactions between the warlord trait and that Grudge's End. That is really nice. I like that. That's very, very cool.
There's a lot of those kind of interactions in this codex where you start to look at each one of the individual abilities on its own, and you go, "That's pretty cool," but it's not that meaningful. But once you begin to layer them on top of each other, the synergies start to really add up, and you have some really potent abilities and potent weapons that come up.
Awesome. No, love it. I especially love the Einherjar champ build that you were putting. The Exactor was definitely on my hit list. But yeah, working with the warlord trait, as you said, the what was it, a warrior lord? That sounds horrendous. But I know that you had said that that kind of build you were thinking that that's more of a maybe like a fun way, whereas maybe the more practical build and the more maybe actually kind of force multiplying an army benefiting build would be to go with your Cal with the long list, and then the Grudge's End as well. And I have seen a bit of chat about that, and that the Einherjar champ is just a really, really cool character. But am I right in saying that, so if you're taking, say, a battalion and you've only got those 3 HQ slots, that third slot is quite kind of prime territory, and you've got 4 HQs to choose from. You've got your Cal, you've got your Einherjar champ, you've got your Broken Iron Master, and you've also got your Grimnir to give you a bit of a kind of psychic support. And I've noticed that some people are saying, yeah, he's nice as a beat stick, this is the Einherjar champ, but I would much rather have the support that the Grimnir brings. What's your kind of thoughts on that, and what are the main kind of HQs that you're honing in on for your lists?
Yeah, so I think that is part of the problem is you have the limited number of HQ slots, and I like the call because he really adds the versatility and utility to the list. I'm taking Hekaton Land Fortresses, so I want to have the Forge Master because he synergizes very well with them. And one of the only I would call weaker parts of this book is the secondaries. There's some that are good, but it's having access to a psychic character unlocks a strong third secondary, and I'm sure we've all been there looking at our opponent's army saying, what do I take from my third secondary? And he really helps to solve that. He also has a power to give you additional CP. As you've kind of probably picked up on the theme, this army likes having CP to spend, so that's really helpful. The other big problem with the Einherjar champion is he unfortunately, as a combat character, only has 4 attacks. So it's hard to really get tons of value out of him. in the kind of Bloody Rose faction, where we get the extra tax on the charge, it becomes a little more interesting. And so it's definitely situations where I can see yourself wanting to take him. He's not pure fluff. I mean, it's pretty deadly, as we described. It's just usually the characters serve more in this army, serve more of a buff and augmentation role, as opposed to a damage role. Your units tend to do most of the damage.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So on that point then, so let's kind of hone in on the Grimnir a wee bit, because we've got the Skeen, or the Skein-Rot discipline that he has access to. So yeah, in terms of the psychic powers, I think. I think the gain of CP, that interface echo, pretty much an auto include. You've said the army is very CP hungry, and on a warp charge value of 5, you get a CP, which I think is awesome. What are the other spells that you are kind of looking to take into with this guy?
Yeah, so typically, what I'll take with him is the interface echo, and then my second power will be fortify. Fortify gives a unit an extra toughness and a 6-up Fiona Pain. It's, with the exception of the Berserkers, the only way to get a Fiona Pain in the army. And it's really useful, especially on something like your bike squads, where suddenly you go up to toughness 6, which is a nice break point, and you have a 6-up Fiona Pain, which can be enough to offset 2 damage or 3 damage shots coming in and make it so you have to take another hit to kill you. And you layer that with the 5 invuln save, and suddenly you're looking at things becoming much more survivable than they otherwise would have been. Also, when I'm taking the Grimnir, I tend to take another relic, which was worth mentioning, called the Murmuring Staff.
Oh,
And the Murmuring Staff is, it's a staff that allows you to cast a psychic power after casting a psychic action. So you can go up and you can psychic interrogate, or you can warp patrol, and you can still give yourself a CP or give fortify. And additionally, it gives you a third psychic power. And for me, I tend to take the third power as Null Vortex.
yeah.
Though I'll be honest, I've only ever cast it once. It's hard to get off. It's cost warp charge value of 8. You have to select the enemy unit within 12, but it just turns off invuln saves. Incredibly powerful ability, but hard to get off. Some of the other ones are interesting, and I'd like to try and mess around with them. But realistically, you can cast 2 powers. It's usually going to be a psychic action and one of those either fortify or interface echo. And if he's not doing an action, then he's doing those 2 almost every single time, or sleep.
Nice, I like that. Yeah, and just having that third power, that null vortex as a tech piece, you might go into a matchup where being able to turn off invulns could be just absolutely clutch, right? And I know that you've said it's a warp charge 8, but you can upgrade the Grimnir with a kind of. We'll talk about the upgrades very quickly in a wee second, but you can upgrade him, and you can upgrade a Cal to a High Cal, and the Brocare Iron Master to a Forge Master, to then improve things that they can do, and he can get +1 to cast if I remember rightly.
Yeah, so if you make him a Lord Grimnir, which I said one of the upgrade abilities, then if there are enemy units within 18 that have a judgment token, it makes him real angry, and he gets +1 to his psychic tests.
Perfect. Yeah, pretty cool. Right, so let's talk about very quickly the upgrades. So we've got the Votannic Council. So this is, as we just said, there's those 3 characters that you can upgrade for points. And am I right in saying those points didn't go up, so the actual upgrading of the characters never changed?
Correct. Yeah, those stay the same.
Cool. And you then get benefits depending. So we've got you can change a Cal to a High Cal for 40 points, and basically for that points, you are able to give out full chapter master rerolls. So within 6 inches, has to be core character. You also are able to give out, so you've got that experienced eye, so the Warlord can use the Grim Efficiency ability 1 additional time. So if I'm right in saying this is the one that hands out judgment tokens, is that right?
Yeah, so this is I kind of alluded to earlier when I said that the call can he kind of glares at somebody you can see in the command phase, and they get a judgment token. And what this ability allows you to do is, if you're a high call, then when you destroy an enemy unit that had a judgment token, you can just kind of reassign it. So it's kind of like long list,
Yeah.
but as an innate ability.
Yeah, cool. So that's the efficient exemplar. That's the one where the enemy unit Yeah, so if the enemy unit dies a judgment token, you can hand it off. And then you've got the Warlord trait that then you can use the judgment token ability an additional time.
Yes, this guy's a judgment token factory. He just very angry, and he just wants things to be removed and tells people to do so.
Exactly. Perfect. Have you now? Obviously, you've told me already the command trait that you usually go for. So, do you, or the warlord trait? Sorry. Do you see that? So, for this experienced style warlord trait, do you find more efficiency coming from the one that you've already kind of spoken about, giving out the judgments when the units die, as opposed to using his own kind of data slate ability at an additional time?
Yeah, so one of the problems with the data sheet ability is it happens in a command phase, which means you can't move before you do it. So the long list ability allows you to move, advance, get somewhere where you can see something interesting, then execute your game plan you're already going to execute, and then give that token to the thing. So you're able to kind of adapt to how your opponent moved and reacted in their turn, without maybe putting your character in too risky of a position where he has a wide view and stuff. If you're on a dense board, that can be really important. If you're on a light board, it becomes less important. But I found that if you have the ability to do it after you move, it's going to be more powerful.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely, I would agree. And yeah, so that's the high cal, 40 points. But you've kind of said that you're more leaning towards just taking a normal cal with the command trait, or the warlord trait rather, sorry, that allows you to just recycle those judgment tokens instead of going kind of down this route.
Yeah, I haven't found that I needed the. For me, when I look at it, the high call, it becomes an evaluation of his command phase ability to give rerolls to characters and core units. Um, and the problem I find is that my combat units tend to be in transports, so they're not eligible to receive it in the command phase. And my other core units are either ranging out ahead of my army in the form of bikes, or are just 10 dudes with bolters. It's not really something I want to spend 40 points to give me rerolls for every single turn. And there are strats to give yourself rerolls in situations where you absolutely need it anyway. So it becomes less important. If you had a unit which really wants to benefit from it every single turn, like say the Terminators, I can definitely see taking the high call. And originally, actually, I had them in my list when I had Terminators, but they're the ones that got cut after the points changes.
Yeah, yeah, no, fair enough. Okay, so that's the high cal. We've got the Grimnir, which is we've already kind of said. It allows you to attempt to manifest one more additional psychic power in each of your psychic phases. So is he originally like a one caster, or is he already a stock two caster and then goes to three?
He goes from 2 to 3.
2 or 3, nice, love it. He's then got the Anger of the Ancestors, so each time a Lord Grimnir model attempts to manifest psychic power from the scale not discipline, if there are any enemy units within 18 of this model with one or more judgment tokens, you add 1 to that psychic test. So it's obviously not stacking with every unit that has a judgment, it just says any unit. So, but still pretty good, +1 to cast, not bad.
Absolutely. He makes that 8 go to a 7, which becomes more of a coin flip, which is much more reliable. Um, 5 for the interface that goes to a 4. I don't know about you guys, but whenever I cast the mind science powers, I tend to fail them. Maybe it's a Tau player in me. I'm just not used to them, but I frequently roll low.
Yeah, but yeah, every little helps, right? Now the Warlord trait, I don't really see this maybe be paid much. Add 6 inches to the range of the psychic powers from Scale, not Discipline. I guess maybe coming into more play for that, as we said, that null vortex, that 12-inch pushes it to 18. But all the other kind of buff ones, and then obviously the CP one has no range, so not really much of a benefit here.
Somewhat. So the fortify ability, I believe, is also 12 inches. So that can be nice to raise up to 18. Again, your bikes tend to wander. Although your character being on the move 8 inches with the 5-inch move plus 3-inch advance means that really you have to be within 20 inches of them at the beginning of your turn to give them the ability. And that's assuming you don't move the guys back to you. So it's probably mostly you're going to see the value in null vortex, but having that extra range means your guys can spread out a bit more without you having to really commit. And that is one of the things that I think Votann is requires you to do, which is to kind of commit your resources in particular directions. Um, as the game goes on, you don't have that kind of perfect flexibility speed where you can radically around the board and also interact on the same turn. You can move very quickly, but that's what you're doing. You're moving. That's really all your turn is. So you kind of want to set up turn and then set up camp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good, man. So that's Lord Grimnir. I think for 25 points, I think it's a worthwhile investment. And then you've got the last but not least, the Brokir Forge Master. So you will turn the Brokir, was it Iron Master into a Forge Master. So what you get for this, which is pretty cool. So once per battle round, if the model's on the battlefield, and you use a Votann Wargear strat, if the unit selected to use that strat is a friendly league unit within 6 inches of it, you reduce the CP cost of that stratagem by 1. Note that the CP cost is only reduced by 1 for the use of that stratagem. Any future uses are the normal amount. So it's basically once per battle round, you could make a 1 CP cost 0, or a 2 CP cost 1, or 3 to 2, and all that stuff. Pretty powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at the beam stratagem for your mirror being 1 CP, that means every single time you shoot that weapon, suddenly you're doing 4 mortal wounds if they're over 15. Makes that gun a lot scarier, that's for sure. Also worth mentioning some of the other interesting Votann Wargear stratagems. If you have bikes nearby, you can do a strat to give them -1 to hit, and you can reroll. If you have an enemy unit deep strike within 12 inches of a unit that has an upgrade called Scanner, which is a common upgrade to ignore cover, you can Auspex scan them for 2 CP. This becomes 1 CP if you're nearby their guy. A lot more willing to scan something like that. Worth mentioning that the land fortress has the scanner keyword, so it can Auspex scan something, which is pretty cool. So a lot of instances where you can make use of this. Most commonly, I find myself using the Emir strat with this just to get value every time I shoot.
Love it. Yeah, great. And that makes that cost absolutely nothing. So, fantastic. We've then got Ancestral Judgment. So his special thing is the Forge Master's Eye. So every time the Forge Master makes an attack on a modified rune roll of a 6, the target attack has 1 or more Judgment tokens. That attack inflicts a number of mortal wounds on the target equal to the damage characteristic of the attack. So that was the thing that we'd kind of already spoken about at the top of the show. It had some very strong combinations with the auto wounding element of the arm and the judgment tokens when you roll to hit. But now that's kind of been dulled down a wee bit, but it's still nice, still a nice to have, right? It's not something that you're kind of hanging your entire tactics on, but it's nice to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you start looking at running into combat with his hammer and getting some 6s to wound, doing mortals to get around a tough invuln save or something like that. It comes up more often than you think, so definitely worth having.
Perfect. And then the last but not least, we've got the Warlord trait that you can take from him, the Master Armourer. So usually he would be healing, was it a D3 wounds to a vehicle, or is it, sorry, he can use the Brokier's Guild ability, the model being repaired again, sorry. So usually it's kind of stock on him as D3 wounds you're healing, but now you can regain up to 3, just flat 3, or it could take it also up to 4 if you've got any ECOG models in the unit as well. So a bit more reliability with that. And then once per battle round, when you take a saving throw and it's failed for a friendly league vehicle or exoframe model, if it's within 6 inches, you can just 0 it out, which sounds pretty good.
It's not bad, that's for sure. You can imagine this coming up where your opponent shoots you with a hammerhead, is thrilled that they hit wounded into your land fortress, and you go 0 damage, bud. And suddenly they're not as happy as they used to be. It's pretty bonkers, especially when it's one of those layers that you apply over top of the defensibility of the 4 invuln save, the toughness 8, the 16 wounds, and no reroll to wounds, and then you can blank a damage roll, turn to 0. You can CP reroll one of those 4 invuln saves. The land fortresses survive is kind of the takeaway.
Yeah, no, awesome. Yeah, anything to make those fortresses better, baby. So yeah, cool. So that's the 3 upgrades that you can give. I'd say probably going to see quite a lot of use out of all 3, but you can kind of tweak to suit your lists or what have you. But they seem like really good additional abilities for the points investment, I would say.
Absolutely, yeah. They're all 3 of them have merit. I think all 3 of them will probably be seen in different types of builds. So it'll be exciting to see, what people come up with more.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I think we're doing not bad for time. So let's just try and kind of round this up. We've got 3 things that I want to finish talking about. So I want to talk about the secondaries, that we have on offer for Votann. I want to just very quickly, I think, rattle through the units that we think are probably the top. I mean, the good thing about this new book is there's not that many units to go through, but we can certainly just pick on the kind of the key ones that we think are definitely going to see play, and then just maybe a couple of the stratagems that we think you're probably going to see time and time again. So let's go for secondaries. So you kind of already said that the secondaries aren't not amazing, and you may be having to face that difficult decision of what you're taking for your third secondary. But is there any Votann specific secondaries that you've been taking in your games?
Yeah, so the ones that are most interesting to me, the first one is no mercy, no respite. So that's talking about like no prisoners, grind them down. There's that category, and this is the ancestors are watching, or the ancestors be creeping, as I think what I'm calling it. This one, you get 2 CP anytime you in any phase where a Votann unit destroys an enemy unit that had a judgment token. Sounds like playing the game to me. If they have three judgment tokens on it, you get an extra point. You get 3 points. So that means you can get up to 6 points on this objective in a single turn if you kill something at 3 in those shooting and something in combat. When you combine that with long list, where you begin to ship those judgment tokens around, you can really crank up the points and be really, really quite efficient with how you do this. Turn something with 2 into 3. You can imagine a turn. I've done this in where you have the call sees somebody, gives them a token. You use one of your abilities to give them 2 tokens, and then then you run objectives, so they got a third token. You kill it, and then you move one of those tokens, something else that had 2 tokens. You have 3, and now suddenly you get 6 points. It can add up pretty quick. There is a bit of a downside to this. At the end of the battle, you lose points by 1 point for each unit that had a judgment token on it. While it might seem like, oh, it's fine, I'll just crush my opponent, and sometimes you do, table them. It just be a little efficient with or conservative with how you place your tokens out. Try and stack them up high, as opposed to spreading them out everywhere, and you're probably going to be fine. I've usually score an average of 13 or 14 points on this every time I use it.
Yeah, no, great. I mean, you had me at 6 points a turn, Brian. But that wee caveat at the end is something, because you're thinking, well, okay, if I can do this, if I can max this primary out within 3 turns. But then, yeah, you need to be careful, because every unit you leave alive with the judgment token, it's chipping away at that. So yeah, I was kind of thinking in my head, I was like, would you be averaging maybe 12 to 13 here? So I think if you're saying you get maybe 13, 14, that's pretty good going. And yeah, just be smart with your tokens, because am I right in saying for some of the ways that you give out tokens, you don't have to do it? Is that right? You can choose.
Yes, and well, kind of. You every time a unit kills something, it gets a judgment token immediately. There's no choice there. Giving something on an objective a token, you only give one thing that's on an objective a token. One thing that's probably most important to keep in mind is it doesn't say something can only have 3 judgment tokens. That's where the ability stops having a benefit. But you could have 27 judgment tokens on something. It just doesn't do anything else for you. So notice a lot of these abilities talk about having 1 or more, 3 or more. That's because you can put a lot of judgment tokens on something. So don't feel like you get the 3 and that's the hard line.
I like that. No, very good spot as well. No, good. Cool. So yeah, just be smart with your tokens. Okay. Anything else jump out at you for secondaries?
So growth masses can be pretty interesting. This is one where you pick the identify 5 units in your opponent's army. One of them has to be the warlord. You get 1 point for killing them. If they're 150 points or more, you get another. And if you kill in a combat, you get another. So you can get up to 15 points. You lose a point for each one that's alive at the end of the game. This can be really interesting in matchups where your opponent has maybe a bunch of big characters, like I'm thinking of demons. Maybe the Battlecry or a Bloodthirster, another Bloodthirster, some Flamer units. Things you're going to have to kill to win the game anyway. And things that are great to kill in combat, with Berserkers. You could easily be looking at 12, 13 points out of this. I found it to be a pretty reliable 10 points into the right armies, but it's definitely have to have the right targets for it. And then the other 2 are, none of them are bad. The other 2 are okay. The action one, you go to actions, you dig around for gold, you roll dice. On a 6, you found gold, you get an extra 3 points if you control that objective at the end. Otherwise, you get 3 points for looking for gold. There's ways to make that roll a little better instead of a 6. Just like any action where you have to do actions in the midfield, it's as good as the number of objectives in the midfield. So that's kind of a judgment call you have to make based on your opponent's army and how the game and the mission is. Lay claim is interesting as well. It's kind of the battlefield supremacy one. So we're talking about engage and all that. You put out 3 objectives. Your opponent, puts out 3 objectives that can't be in their deployment zone, have to be away from the edge and a bit far from each other. And then it's nice and simple. End of the game, when you control, you get 5 points. This can be great if you're going second. It can be real risky if you're going first. You obviously don't know this when you pick the secondary. So I would only take this if you just want to disrespect your opponent and say, I'm going to table you before the game even starts. And there are definitely matchups where that's going to be the case. Your opponent might score high, but you're going to table them. It's a reliable 15 points, so it's worth looking at.
No, okay, I like that. Yeah. So overall, so you've had quite a number of games. What is in general? Because I know obviously they can change depending on the matchup and the opponent, what have you. But what are the kind of the main 3 that you've been taking most often when you're playing Votann?
So I'll frequently take ancestors, unless no prisoners is better. Sometimes it's just easier to not have to worry about the judgment tokens or the risk of leaving things alive and just take prisoners and get that 15. I'll tend to take banners whenever possible. It's generally your opponent really doesn't want to come towards you if they can avoid it. So having the ability to put up banners and control the objective is nice. One thing that's worth mentioning about the Broke here, the kind of tech marine boy, is that he has the ability to advance and do actions, which is nice because it gives you that 8-inch move to kind of do an action, which can be a little limiting when you have a 5-inch, little stunty dwarves trying to run up to objective and plant a banner. You can also mitigate that some more by maybe starting a squad inside of a transport that you might not want to have in that transport. You get them out to do the action, get that extra 3-inch move, then hop the unit that you actually want in that transport in there right away and start the game. So banners, ancestors are watching, and then if my opponent doesn't give me a kill one, this is where having the wizard is nice. It gives you the ability to, warp ritual. I'll look for opportunities to do late claim. I'll look for opportunities to do grudge match. Maybe I'll do bring it down or something along those lines. And if I absolutely can't have any of those, I'll take engage. Engage is usually safe for 10 points because the land fortresses tend not to die, and I tend to want to put them in different parts of the battlefield, different table quarters, so that your opponent can't just stack up all their good stuff into them or avoid them completely. If you put them on 3 of the 5 objectives on the battlefield, your opponent has to deal with them somehow. That's kind of exactly what I want my opponent to be doing.
Nice, love it. Cool. Okay, so that's secondaries, and yeah, I think I've got some decent secondary play. As you say, I think the ancestors is a good one, or as you say, just take this one that rewards you just for killing things, and then yeah, you do have maybe a bit of a kind of pivot to the psychic secondaries if you're taking the Grimnir and things like that as well. And yeah, banners always a good one if you're wanting to kind of keep things away from you and kind of control the kind of the board space. Then yeah, banners seems to be like a decent one for you. I suppose there's nothing else really better that you're going to be getting in shadow operations apart from obviously the wealth one, but as you say, that's kind of...
Yeah, Knockman's a little hard. You can put things in a deep strike if you want to. There's a way of teleporting guys, but it requires you to build around other builds of the army than the one I'm currently running. Could look at different secondaries, but with the kind of heavy fortress build I'm going for, I find that those tend to be the ones I gravitate towards.
Nice, perfect, cool. So that's secondaries. Let's move on and we'll touch upon the units. Okay, so probably don't have to go into too much detail with regards to the characters. Okay, so the HQs, we've kind of spoken about them quite a bit, but just give kind of a general overview. So you've got the Cal, which you can obviously turn into the High Cal. He's your kind of captain role. He's given the reroll 1s to core and characters to hit within 6 inches. He's also able to give out your judgment tokens as well. You've then got the named Cal, that Uthar the Destined that we kind of briefly touched upon when we were talking about the Greater Thurian League. He's quite nice, so he has got an ability to just make a dice roll just a 6, so he just autos a dice roll into 6, which I can definitely see some play maybe with the Magna Rail cannons on a Hecaton land fortress. So possibly if you're taking an Uthar, maybe a minimum of 1 land fortress, and that's a nice wee combination there where you can just make sure he's always getting the 6 to wound. The good thing is you can actually change it after the fact, right? So you can roll the dice and then he just modifies it to a 6.
Yeah, his similar abilities are in, I think, Chaos have stratagem for it. Knights have something where they can turn dice into a 6. It's great value where you just say, what did I roll? I need that to be better. Let's make it better.
Yeah, no, very cool. He's also got quite a nifty ability where it makes all damage incoming to him just goes to damage 1.
Yeah, he's hard to kill.
Mhm.
That's for sure. Which is quite nice.
Absolutely, and yeah, I suppose you could take this guy in any league, but I suppose again it's one of these things where he reaches full potential in his own league. But I suppose you could run him in other leagues as well. But yeah, so that's Uthar. I think he's good. What is 160 points? For a decently tanky character, he's quite a good buff piece. He can do with a decent amount of work. He can pump out mortals when he's swinging in as well with his Blade of the Ancestors also. So yeah, no, I think he's quite nice. But then, as we said, we've touched on the Grimnir. He's your Psyker. He's got the 4-up invuln. You don't take combat attrition modifiers when you're within 6 inches of him. He's also got a couple of little Corv support things. So he suffers a perils, and it contains one or more of the Corv models. One of those models is destroyed, and the effect of the perils of the warp is ignored, which is just awesome because you've got like the one and only Psyker in your army. You don't want to be taking perils rolls, or maybe wasting CP to reroll things. So that could be quite nice to just nullify that as well. And then obviously the destruction of those models, they don't count towards morale and stuff like that. So yeah, that's Grimnir. Anything we've kind of missed on him?
No, he's just a nice workhorse.
Yeah, no, perfect. Okay, moving on. We've kind of touched upon the Einherjar champion, just a good beat stick character. He has got the ability to reduce damage by 1. He kind of buffs your Hearthguard units. So Hearthguard units within 6 of the model, they reroll wounds of 1, which is quite cool. He is -1 to wound in melee. He's got 2-up save, and then obviously in Ymir he can get his 4-up invuln as well. And yeah, and what was this one? Mass driver accelerators. So he gets each time his model ends a charge move, select an enemy unit with engagement range of the model, roll a d6. The result is an unmodified 6, or if it equals or beats the highest toughness characteristic enemy unit, he does d3 mortal wounds. So that kind of nice. Could do a couple of mortals in the charge in. So yeah, just a nice hitty character in melee. Yep. Anything we've missed there?
No, like I said, he serves his purpose that he needs to serve. It's pretty
Yep.
cool.
Perfect, and he's an awesome model as well. I love the model, just so chunky and nice. And yeah, Broke Your Iron Master. We've spoken about him at length, but just kind of briefly. So he's got multispectral visor. In the command phase, he can basically give +1 to hit to a vehicle, or core as well. That's pretty cool. And it's within 9 inches, so a decently range on that. We've got the Broker's Guild. In the movement phase, he can repair, so as we already said, he repairs d3 wounds to a vehicle or exoframe model, and then he's got his Ironkin Assistant. While the unit has an Ironkin Assistant, it can perform actions even if it advanced, and it can also shoot whether its action failing. So yeah, just really nice to have this wee character. He can advance, do an action, and he can still shoot, so you basically lose no efficiency from him whatsoever, and he's your little action monkey, which is nice. He's got his ECOG support. And if it contains at least 1 ECOG model, you regain 1 additional loss wound. So when he repairs, he's getting +1 to that roll. And yeah, if they get destroyed, no morale stuff. So pretty cool guy. As you've already said, the Graviton rifle is nice. There's some good synergies we can get there as well. And then yeah, he can put out a decent number of attacks in combat also. So just a really good unit.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning. A lot of people probably haven't played with character units before, and it's important for the Iron Master to read which of his abilities are from him and which abilities are from his unit. So, for example, everything on the data sheet you just read is from his unit, which means you can string that 5-man unit out with 2-inch coherency and have suddenly instead of having to have him within 3 inches of a land fortress, you can have his unit, which maybe has a footprint now of 15 inches plus 3 inches on either side. You have a 20-inch range here, and you can slide 8 inches either way to kind of do that repair of 3 inches. Same thing applies to the 9-inch with the +1 to hit. So both those abilities are from the unit. I believe when you upgrade them to blanket damage, it's from him himself. And I think there's the stratagem is from him himself as well. So important for positioning for him, but character units are pretty interesting. As a Tau player, I'm very familiar with drones and character units and all that. So lots of tricks you can do with them.
Nice. No, and obviously you get good spots as well to make sure that you're aware of the rules that are from the unit and rules that are just from him as well, so we don't get caught out on that. Perfect. And then the Cal, we've already said we've spoken about him. He's your standard kind of captain, and he's given out judgment tokens as well. So you can give out one per command phase, and then obviously there's warlord traits that we can use for him to recycle some more as well. Right, moving on, let's go on to our one and only troop, Hearthkin Warriors. So these guys are quite cool. So they come in squads of 10 as standard, can get up to a maximum of 20. You can give them your bolters, or you can upgrade them to ion. They've got some nice little upgrades as well. So you've got the Medipack, which can zero a damage, is it once per turn or battle round? Yep, cool. We've got some kind of scanner abilities as well. You've also got the comms array, which means that they're pretty much always going to be in kind of captain range. I don't really know much if you're gonna kind of spend the 5 points on that. You might want to. And yeah, they can also take some decent special weapons or heavy weapons. So the Magna Rail Rifle, is that right? Or sorry, the Magna Rail Rifle, which is the one we've kind of been talking about, I think is definitely something you want to take on these guys. So if you're obviously running patrol, if you're running battalion, I don't think you're ever going to run a brigade with these guys because they're too expensive. But yeah, these are your mandatory troops. You have to take some if you're running these battalions, or these detachments rather. So thoughts on the Hearthkin?
They're quite strong. Quick correction: the Medipack is once per turn, not per battle. Also misspoke to me. But you'll notice a couple things about them. First off, they have 2 attacks base, which might not seem that great at strength 4, but remember that the judgment tokens work in combat too. So suddenly you have 20 attacks plus 1 for the sergeant coming in, and every 4 to hit is an auto wound. That's a lot of armor saves. Actually, when you start combining with rerolls from being nearby, various characters. The medic is another one of those layering of the defensive characteristics that is really powerful. You combine that with the fact that the Thane has a wave field crest to give him a 4-up invuln save, and he has 2 wounds. That means that you're taking 4 invuln saves on this character for a bunch of the attacks. So normally we need 4 attacks to kill him on average, needing a 4-up. But with the Medipack, the first one of those is ignored. So now you'd be looking at 6 attacks that get blanked by him alone before you even get to the other guys. Combine that with the 5-up invuln save that the rest of the squad has, and you're starting to really have a pretty survivable unit with the armor contempt, no reroll wounds. These guys are harder to push and off objectives than you would otherwise think, even if they're not in cover.
Yeah, no, I agree. And can also, so we've talked about their fair amount of hit they can put out in melee with the auto hits. In terms of the damage they can put out in shooting as well, can be pretty decent. I've kind of quite enjoyed well, not enjoy, I mean I've not played them, but I've enjoyed the thought of upgrading them to the ion blasters as opposed to the bolters. With obviously you can kind of mitigate some of the range issues there, and you're getting something that's strength 5 minus 2 damage instead of the bolter profile. What's your thoughts on what are you kitting your guys out with?
So my guys tend to just have the bolters. I like having the 28-inch range as opposed to the 22. The shots combined with the fact that at 14 inches you have AP2 instead of AP1 is nice, and the grudge tokens, I tend to use them to clear up chaff units or things that are kind of in the way of the stuff I really want to kill. But ion blasters are great. I can see an argument for them as well. I just want to have lots of shots, so I go for that. Worth mentioning, I told you about the 10-inch grenades. They're not frag grenades, they're strength 5 AP1. Um, so a 10-inch weapon that's better than your main gun, it's pretty good.
Like that. Very, very cool. Yep. And then, yeah, the only other thing that I wanted to talk about these guys, so with the Medipack, which is just good in general, also opens up a strat, I believe, to return D3 of these models in the command phase. So you could regain maybe an objective that you took guys off of, and then you've now retaken it, and do some other kind of fun shenanigans there, right?
Yep, anyone who's played against Tide of Traders for Chaos has probably seen this roadshow before, where you shoot off 4 or 5 guys, and then they regrow them in the command phase and take back the point you were trying to shoot them off of. This is particularly deadly when you have a squad that is hard to shift. Maybe most of them are behind a wall. You have a couple guys sticking out on the objective. They shoot the squad. You take the guys they can see, and then you regrow them to take the objective back. Because you're unlikely to lose the entire squad from a single activation. So that could be quite strong.
Yeah, agreed. Awesome, love it. So yeah, so just even your little basic foot troops, I think yeah, definitely do the business, and I like having them. Okay, Einherjar Hearthguard. Now this is one that I've heard quite a lot of chat about. You've kind of already kind of admitted the fact that you had originally been looking at these guys for your list, but the points increases, they were one of the first things to get cut. I have heard a lot of chat surrounding their Vulcanite disintegrators and full rerolls on a squad of these boys to just put out a mass amount of mortal wounds. Do you see these guys being taken? And if so, are we talking a couple of squads? Are we talking big blocks? Are we talking mass Hearthguard? Or do we think that with the points, you're maybe better suited taking other things? What's your thoughts?
So this unit is really is still very strong. As you mentioned, the Vulcan disintegrators do a lot of damage. The grenade launchers they have in addition to that do a lot of damage. All those guns, instead of being 18 inches, go to 22 in your mirror. They have 2 up saves with -1 damage, and then they get a 4 up invuln in your mirror. You kind of begin again layer all the stuff on top of each other, and this unit becomes pretty hard to remove. Um, it's also worth mentioning, not to kind of sneak ahead in the strats, but there's a stratagem called site-to-site transport, which allows you to pick up a unit and then deep strike it immediately on the battlefield. So kind of move it, put it right back down. And they need to have the teleportation keyword. Hearthguard can take an upgrade called Teleport Crest, which allows you to have the teleportation keyword. Um, and so what I was doing was I would have this unit. It would maybe sit in the back, kind of guard some stuff, and then I would site-to-site transport it somewhere on the battlefield to shoot the enemy. Or I would start it in reserve, deep strike it, kill something on one table quarter, and then site-to-site transport it to another table quarter, and then suddenly it's impacting multiple areas of the game as the game goes on. There's also you can give the sergeant a relic with one of the stratagems, which is pretty cool. And that relic that I would give them is it's called like warp shriek, I think, is the name of it. And it basically made the teleportation strat free. So instead of costing 2 CP for a big unit of Hearthguard, it costs 0 CP. And it also allowed the entire unit, you could ever deep strike within 12 inches of that whole unit. And a 10-man unit that has no deep strike is a giant footprint. That is quite strong. It's a lot of matchups. I mean, thinking demons or blood angels or any of these armies that really want to come in from deep strike and try and hammer you, Sisters of Battle, and you just say, nope, can't play the game in this table quarter because I'm sitting over here. And then you combine that with the ability to then teleport to a different table quarter and say, can't play it over here either. It's pretty strong.
I like that. I love the movement shenanigans from these little dwarves. That's awesome. Yeah, you're quite right. Warp Strike is the name of it. Yep, it has to be teleportation model only, which you then obviously unlock with the teleportation crest, the teleport crest. Love it. So yeah, these guys I think are still really strong. And yeah, I suppose with the fact that you're going Ymir, the We Feel crest just doesn't really give you much value. It gives a 4 up invuln to the bearer. Is that right? So the bearer's unit, sorry. They gain the shield crest keyword. The bearer has wounds characteristic of 3 and a 4 up invuln, but you're getting the 4 up invuln, you know.
Yeah, the 4-bit ball is not super important. 3 wounds with -1 damage is a really good break point, but it's only for the sergeant, so it becomes less interesting. And the site-to-site transport stratagem just makes these guys go to a totally different level. So it's just really hard to argue not to take that.
and also the fact that you can also set them up coming in from reinforcements to, like in deep strike as well, so they're not having to foot slog or get in and out of transports as well. I suppose is a good thing for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it solves one of those problems I mentioned earlier, which is kind of the army can get to where it needs to be pretty quickly with the acceleration, but once it's there, it really wants to play the game in that space. And this allows you to have a dynamic aspect to this army that is not as easy for your opponent to play around because these guys could suddenly appear anywhere.
Love it. Cool. We then go on to the Chthonian Berserks. Love these guys. Models look awesome, and yeah, oh baby, they can dish out the damage, right? In combat. So these guys have got a t-shirt save, but they have a shrug. So against all damage, they have a 5-up shrug. Against damage 1, they have a 4-up shrug, which is pretty cool. For Styber Stims, you can reroll charge rolls, and also they have fight on death. So even if you don't manage to get these guys in and they're taken out in melee, you're going to get their attacks out of them anyway. They can get a lot of attacks, especially with the heavy plasma axe, because we have a sweep roll for them as well, so you're making 2 hit rolls for every attack instead of 1. They also can take strike instead if you'd rather try and get the 2 damage through rather than the 1 damage. They've also got the Mole Grenade Launcher, which is a Hunter D6 weapon, 24-inch range, strength 5, minus 2 AP, 1 damage with blast, but that then opens up a strat for them, I believe, to get full rerolls to hit for them in combat.
Well, that's a stratagem that they just have access to called Cyberstem Infusion. Just being a berserker lets you spend a CP and get full rerolls to hit. There is a stratagem called Subterranean Explosives, which you can use on a unit that has been hit by this. And then each time that unit makes a ranged attack, you subtract 1 from the wound. And if you score a hit against a unit that's not Titanic or flying, then you can imagine it's kind of like the Thunderfire cannon. They have their movement and they get fight last. It's 2 CP strat. It's a warrior strat though, so that can be reduced with the Forge Master, which is worth mentioning. But I think you'll find a lot of people tend not to take the grenade launcher. At least I'm not.
Yeah, so I think obviously fight last is good, but with a unit that can fight on death anyway, probably just going to get much, yeah, as you say, just going to get value from that in general.
Yeah, so honestly, the main reason I don't take the grenade launcher is the model's on a 50mm base. When these guys are on 20mm bases, they're itty bitty, and when they come out of a transport, I want them to have the tiniest footprint possible so that the transport can't be wrapped. And when you add a 50mm base to that, suddenly they need a lot more room to fit out of the transport, and that becomes a lot harder for you to mitigate against your opponents trying to stop you from doing that. So. The mole launcher isn't bad. Gives you an extra wound, gives you an extra attack. That's all great. It's not too many points. It's really just the base size.
Yeah, no, ideal, cool. 28mm. God, I thought these guys would be at least on 32s. That's
yeah. You want to hear something that's really crazy? Is the Terminators we mentioned earlier are on 32mm bases.
33.
32. But
sorry,
still,
they're 32, but these guys are on 28s.
Yeah, and you think they'd be on 40s, and these would be on 32s, just one size down for each of them. They're dwarves, man. They're little.
That's true, of course, yeah. But yeah, we're not listing this show, and that's absolutely fine. So cool, okay. But yeah, Berserks, I think, great unit, and you're obviously using them as you've said there as well. I think these guys will see play just as a counter punch, as a combat punch. You can get them out your vehicles, which we're maybe going to see quite a lot of, and they can go out and kill stuff on points. They can trade, and they're also quite difficult for your opponent to deal with because they're that fight on death as well.
Yeah, you'll notice. I mean, there's this kind of anybody who's played like a card game of any kind, like Magic or something like that, is probably familiar with the term cantripping, and it's this idea of you're getting 2 of their resources for 1 of yours, and there's a lot of that in this army. So whether it's the beam weapons beaming over multiple things, so you have 1 activation killing multiple units, or it's the berserkers coming out killing something, then they have to charge you to kill you, and then you kill them back with fight on death. Suddenly your 1 unit of berserkers killed 2 of their units. So there's a lot of that kind of cantripping in this army, which is part of its strength.
Love it. Yeah, good. And yeah, magic references always welcome on the show. It's just funny. It could be quite a general language for all gamers, so I like that. Right, moving on. So we've got the Brokir Thunderkin. This is one of the units that I'm just not a fan of. Are and I kind of don't even want to talk about them now. Are you in agreement with this, or are you about to change my mind completely?
Uh, these guys would be incredibly interesting if the Exo Armor counted as two models, or in the Land Fortress. And currently, they count as I think three models, which means they can't fit anything else in the Land Fortress. But if you could put five Berserks and three Thunderkin in the Land Fortress, I might look at these guys pretty closely because they're not terrible. Nothing in this book is terrible. They've got a bunch of shots. They have some interesting guns. They have conversion beamers, which are smaller versions of the big one that goes on the fortress, but still have a nice long range. They're just a little too expensive. Don't do quite enough, and there's better things to spend your points on right now.
Yep, agreed. And yeah, it's kind of one of these things where it's like, maybe other books like these would be quite a viable unit, but within this book and the points being very tight, I think you're quite right. I think there's other stuff we want to be spending in points on. So let's move on, shall we? But yeah, really cool models to look at though. I do quite like them. The exo kind of armor. But yeah, let's move on. Sagittar again. This is one that if I was to pick all the units in this book, it was the Sagittar and the Thunderkin that I wasn't too hot on. We didn't really kind of change with the Thunderkin. Are you about to change my mind with the Sagittar?
The Sagittars are actually one of the ones which I do quite like. There's two builds of kind of how I've seen people make the army fast, and one of those is with land fortresses, and the other one is lots of Sagittars. Sagittars have quite a few shots for what they do. They put out 12 shots in their basic form by taking the autocannon and the twin bolt cannon, which all AP2 2 damage, but you combine them with Ymir, suddenly become AP3 2 damage. They're auto wounding on sixes, fives, or fours to hit. And then you have five or six of these things running around. It can be quite strong. The other part that's really quite useful for this is your Hearthkin Warrior squads have to come in squads of 10. You buy two Sagittars, suddenly you can combat squad them in squads of 5. Let's put a 5 minion in the back, have a 5 minion to run up and take an objective or plant a banner. It allows you to spread out those resources, which would otherwise be kind of congealed in one space. Or if you want to take, I've seen some people take 30 Berserkers and then put them in 6 Sagittars. Now suddenly you have 6 units of Berserkers, which kind of helps you break the rule of 3. So that could be quite interesting too. I'm not as big of a fan of these things then compared to the Land Fortress because they do die. They're toughness 7 with a 3-up save and 9 wounds. So in Ymir they get the 5-up invuln. But they're not nothing to kill because they're still armor contempt and no reroll to wounds and everything. But at toughness 7, 9 wounds, they don't have the same layering of survivability that the Land Fortress does. But the inverse of that is you have more of them, and that lets you spread out, and so it's harder for your opponent to pin you down.
No, I like that. Yeah, a really good point as well with the fact that you can kind of combat squad because you will have to have a unit sitting back on your battlefield objective. If it's a full 10 of the little Hearthkin, that's like what 150 around roughly kind of points sitting in your backfield objective. If you could just half that and have them sitting there quite happy, just kind of camp and ditch your sitters, then yeah, that could be quite valuable as well. And obviously. Berserk spam sounds amazing. It's 6 of these things with 5 each. Sounds hilarious. Okay, cool. So that's the Sagittar. We've then got the Hernkin Pioneers. Quite a cool kind of unique squad. This they are fast attack, but they have OBSEC. So that was something that I think is just within the kind of the rules of Votann. The troops. So the little Hearthkin, and then there's a Pioneer, yay! Love it, love the floaty bikes. But yeah, so they've got OBSEC, they have a pre-game move, and they can get a good number of shots. Even just a unit of 3 of these boys, you take that high las rotary cannon, like that's a serious amount of shots coming from these guys. We've already kind of spoken about the kind of strat combinations that can come with taking either a pan spectral scanner or perhaps a rollbar searchlight as well. So yeah, I just think really good unit. I think you're definitely going to see them in lists. Do we think auto include good? Like you're just putting them in lists and because of the obsec, the pre-game, and everything that comes with them.
Absolutely. These guys solve a ton of problems. They're incredibly fast. With the 5-up invuln save, they're pretty survivable too. Um, they can have a giant footprint or a fairly small one, depending on how you want to run it. Because being on the big oval bases means you can spread out pretty far, or you can kind of tuck up into a piece of terrain. They have a ton of shots. It's important to note when you give something the high las rotary, that's an addition. So you still have your 9 3-man unit, you still have 9 Magna Coil autocannons at 28 inches in Ymir. You have your 9 high las rotary at 28 inches. And then you also have 6 shotguns at 16 inches, which is super strong. So you combine that with the ability, they're core units, which unlocks a number of stratagems. I tend to take my builds with the high las to get the extra DACA. And then I'll take a scanner. And then I have 2 units of 3. So one unit will have the searchlight and one unit will have the comms. And that's because it unlocks 2 different stratagems, which are pretty useful that we'll probably get to in a minute.
Oh, nice. I like that. Okay, good strat tech. So yeah, I really like these guys. Such cool models, and as you say, they solve a lot of issues with the army as well. So no, love them. Cool. And then I think is this the yes, this is the final kind of icing or the cherry on the cake, shall we say? The Hecaton Land Fortress. Just one of the I love the model. I think one of the coolest models we've got in the range, and yeah, just such a big, meaty, beefy tank that can put out the heart. So, talk to me. Why do you love this thing so much?
It never dies. That's a takeaway. It's it moves 10 inches, which doesn't sound super fast, but it's accelerated, which means that it gets an auto advance of 6. There's a strat we'll talk about later that lets it move even faster. It's got a 2-up armor save with armor contempt, 16 wounds at toughness 8. So already really hard to kill. Talking about like a giant Leman Russ, right? But you combine that with the armor contempt, you combine that with the no rerolls to wound, which is huge, no rerolls to damage. The Ymir ability to get a 4-up invuln save, the Forge Master's ability to blanket damage, to heal at 4 damage, which is worth noting that the way the brackets work on this particular model, anytime you heal for 4 damage, you are guaranteed to go up at least 1 bracket. So that's nice and useful. There's a CP stratagem to make it count as top bracket, and there's a bunch of other strats that take this thing from very good to incredible. And then on top of all that, it transports berserkers. It's hard to go wrong with that. If they kill the land fortress, then out pop a bunch of angry dwarves with hammers that then just destroy their army. So it's really hard for your opponent to deal with these things.
Love it. Yeah, just so everything you've just said. So the fact that it's so hard to remove, the fact that it obviously, as you said, racks the transport, so it can itself be a good staging point for your berserkers to then charge out of. They're obviously getting the additional 3 inches from the disembark as well, and then yeah, just very good unit. What are we? I think I know the answer to this question already. What are we outfitting this thing with?
So if you're Great Arthurian League, there's an argument to be made for having the Magna Rail cannon because of the interaction with the with Uthar, because that's a strength 1 shot, strength 14 -4, 2d3 +6 damage that has that Magna Rail roll. So you can really take advantage of turning that wound dice into a 6 and having it be reliable. With Ymir and with the Ymir strat in particular, I like the main weapon to be the SP heavy conversion beam. And this is that weapon that I described, where it's a 34-inch range. Every hit counts as 2 if you're more than 15 inches away. And it's strength 8 -3, 4 damage each. So it's pretty brutal. Combine that with the 4 mortal wounds you can deal for every if you get 2 hits, and this thing has for me this thing has one shot. Chaos Knights just by activating and popping a couple strats to make it more reliable. Um, the also has 2 other weapons it can have. Either it comes with 4 bolt cannons default. These are 3 shots, strength 6, -2, 2 damage. So it'd be 12 shots from it. Um, I prefer the ion beamers. These are an extra 5 points per weapon, so an extra 20 points on the model. And these are 2 shots, strength 7, -2, 2 damage, but they're beam weapons. And they go from 18 to 22 in Ymir. And it just lets you really take advantage of a couple strats, again, that we'll get to deal more mortal wounds, and also catch your opponent in awkward situations where they're suddenly beaming over multiple units.
I like it. Yeah, cool. So very good. I did think the reply was going to be all beams all the time. Go full beam. But yeah, definitely. I think the argument for the GTL with the heavy Magna rail cannon, just getting that auto 6 every time with Uthar, I think is going to be huge as well. So if people are only taking maybe like the one land fortress, then that definitely works. Okay, so in terms of, so we've kind of been having a good chat about the units. We've touched upon like when you're talking about your list that you're taking. What does a kind of a standard Brian Seipp list, Ymir kind of list look like? What's the makeup of the list?
So, I mean, you're going to start with the 3 big characters. You're going to have the Call, who's going to have that utility, kind of warlord trait, and the cool sniper ability. You're going to have the Grimir to unlock Grimir's to unlock some extra secondaries for me, give me some extra CP so I can use them. And you're going to have the Iron Master to just help me layer those protections onto my big, expensive units. I like to do a battalion because, again, I want CP. So I'll have 3 units of Hearthkin Warriors. We already talked about how they can get value, especially in the late game. Plus their objective secured, always great in this meta. Um, I'll have 2 units of 3 bikes, kind of armed out the way I said. I like to have one with the scanner keyword, or sorry, one with the searchlight keyword, which allows you to, after you hit the target, give it a grudge token. That's great for kind of getting that 1 grudge to 2, or getting the 1 grudge you need on something that didn't have it. And then the other one I like to give it is the other unit is the comms relay. This unlocks, I think it's called multi-spectrum jammer or something along those lines. But essentially what the strat does is you, at the beginning, I think, of any phase, or maybe it's just in any phase, you pick a unit within 12. That unit does not benefit from any auras your opponent has. This is really good when you combine it, or in any event that rolls Bodyguard as an aura. And in particular, what I'm thinking of is Flying Hive Tyrants with Tyrant Guard. If you can turn off their ability to be protected by the Tyrant Guard, then that's really strong. It's definitely important to check with your TO whether or not they count it as an aura. There's arguments to be made in both cases whether it should be or shouldn't be. I find a lot of people count it as an aura, but there are definitely instances where it's not. So, but those are kind of the 2 there. It gives me access to both those stratagems, and as long as I plan appropriately, I can make sure I get maximum value. And then I'll take the 2 land fortresses that we described. I like to have 2 because one can either be ignored pretty easily, or even if they need to, focus fire down. Even these things will die if given enough effort. But if I have 2, I can jam them on the 2 different objectives on opposite sides of the board and make my opponent make some difficult decisions. And then I top it all off with 3 units of 5 Berserkers. I like the Berserkers because they kill everything they touch. They do the cantripping I mentioned. They have AP3 Thunderhammers, and 3 damage is a really good spot to be right now in terms of everything in the game. With the 5 of Brian Seipp and the Fiona Pains, they take way more shooting damage than they have any right to take. You often find yourself left with 2 or 3 guys, and that's enough to do a lot of damage to different things. Yeah, they're incredibly strong. Even that their new points value is still very strong. And that's
Yeah,
2,000 points.
that's your 2K. I like it. Yeah, a really good list, and just a solid on kind of on all fronts. The one thing I forgot to ask when we were going over the Berserks was, are you taking the plasma axes or are you going down the hammer route?
The hammers. I like 3 damage. You could definitely make an argument with the sweep that there are instances where you want to have the ability to do 6 damage or 6 attacks with each one. Uh, for example, I played against Gene Stealer Cult the other day, and I would have loved to have that ability. But against a lot of things in the game, 3 damage is perfect. 3 with -1 damage kills a guy that's 2 wounds or less. 3 into 2 wound guys that have feel no pain on average kills a guy. It's a really nice spot to be. And at strength 10 -3, you're probably getting through most armor. You're putting things on inbound saves if they have them, so it's a good spot to be at. You do subtract 1 to your hit rolls when you hit on 4s. So you have 15 attacks with Berserkers. You're probably averaging 7 or 8 hits. But you combine that with the ability to re-roll your hits with a stratagem that we had mentioned. Now you're looking at 10 hits. And it's also pretty cool in that the 3-up with a -1 is a 4-up to hit. And you can make it so your guys auto wound on 4s to hit. So you can just skip the wound roll altogether. Great against things like Chaos Space Marines, Terminators with that Rune of Damnation with -1 to wound. If you don't roll a wound roll, you don't care about that.
Love it. Yeah, very, very good to you. No, fantastic. Love it. So yeah, that's great. So that's the units. That's the kind of the main kind of star pieces we think, and then we've also had a good rundown of your list as well, Brian. So that was great to kind of hear about. And then we're just going to round this off very, very nice and quick. We're just going to pick out a few of the stratagems that we think are going to be key. Now we've mentioned a number of them throughout the chat as well, so it'll be quite easy to kind of go through them. So the first page I've got here, we've got accelerated response, ancestral sentence, core buster fire pattern, cyberstim infusion, hunter's mark, kin bond, might of the iron here, and optimized volley. Any of these have they been coming up in in your main games?
Yeah, actually, a number of them. So the first one is accelerated response. I mentioned that these accelerated units have the ability to go faster. Um, Accelerated units can auto advance 6. With this CP, you can auto advance 12 instead. That means that your land fortress on turn 1, so you can't see anything because your opponent's hiding because they're giant cowards. You can jam up 22 inches, get into the perfect spot for the next turn with one of your guys. That's great for reaching an objective that's maybe a bit further than a 16 would reach. Or if you have a Sagittar, go to 24 inches. Great. It also works on your bikes, which is worth mentioning. So bikes auto advance 6, go to 18, or go 24 inches. In the end game, it may be a bottom of turn 5. You need to take an objective, go 24 inches with an objective secured bike. It's pretty strong. Then Cyberstem Infusion, I think, is one of the other ones you mentioned.
Yeah.
That one gives you your Berserkers reroll to hit. That's going to be your bread and butter if you have Berserkers. Every single time they go in, you want to have that. It just takes them to a whole new level. The Optimized Volley is okay. Reactive Reprisal, did you mention that one already? Is that a different page?
Yeah, that different page, but we can chat about that as well. Yeah.
Those are interesting as well. Your opponent shoots you, you can shoot back. But the Core Buster Fire pattern is very strong. So this is why I mentioned that if you have the strats and you begin to layer them, these land fortresses do a ton of damage. So taking all these beam weapons, you go from, you have, say somebody's nearby you or 15 inches further away, right? If you have the Core Buster Fire pattern strat and you roll to hit with your guys, every time you hit with a beam weapon, after you've hit with at least one beam weapon, every subsequent thing in your army that shoots that thing with a beam triggers on a 4-up a mortal wound. It's up to 6 mortal wounds per phase. That reliably for 1 CP deals 6 mortal wounds to the unit. Combine that with the Emir strat to deal 4 mortal wounds fairly reliably, and so you're doing 10 mortal wounds to a target before you even rolled the damage for your actual attacks, which is really powerful at taking down these really hard to kill units, maybe Battlecry or stuff like that, which, hits or saves or something, it just bypasses all of that, deals half their damage.
Wow, no, that's awesome. And just to kind of clarify this as well, so you can use this Core Buster Fire pattern and the Ymir strat on one singular land fortress to trigger all this goodness.
Yeah, so the Core Buster Fire pattern is used on an enemy unit. The Ymir strat is used on a single land fortress you have. The Core Buster is definitely important to mention. is used on the enemy unit that you shot at. So say you shoot with one of your land fortresses at a target, and you do 3 of the mortal wounds of the 6 that it could take. You can then shoot it with your other land fortress and trigger the other 3 mortal wounds from that strat because they're still getting hit with beam weapons. So it caps up to 6. So it's very reliable if you want to deal 6 mortal wounds to a target to deal those 6 mortal wounds.
Love it. Wow. And then, as as we know in the game, it's mortal wounds, just the ability to bypass all saves and what have you, and yeah, it's just awesome to just take out those key targets. Love it. Okay, so that's that first page here. We've then got another page. We've got well, I don't really probably need to go over the requisition strats because they're just the very general ones that you'll take. Just extra relics or extra warlord trait, I'm guessing. And then we've got familiar loyalty, light 'em up, luck has, need keeps, toil earns. Great name. We've got mag riders, newfound nemesis, and outflanking pioneers. Anything jumping out from this page?
Yeah, so familiar loyalty, 1 CP, basically everything in your army gets a heroic intervention. It's infantry and bikers. Spoilers, that's everything in your army except for the land fortresses. That's pretty good. If your whole army can heroically intervene, that makes it really hard for your opponent to get on objectives and snag them from you, especially when you have things like berserkers behind walls. They're covering the entire objective. That's really strong. Light 'em up is the stratagem that I mentioned, allowing you to take a searchlight unit and apply a judgment token to something after you've hit it. Really useful for getting that 1 judgment token on something, which will unlock a couple of strats we'll get to in a minute here. The luck has it keeps and toil earns strat is useful if you need to shoot with a unit, and also maybe plant the banner. That'll come up as well. Also gives you another one of the instances of giving you feel no pain. Yeah, I mean, all these strats I've used over the course of the game. They're all like it's the general theme here is going to be that if you've ever read a stratagem in a book for a codex and you thought that's a really good stratagem, they probably have it in the Votann codex, in some form or another.
Yeah. Love it. And that luck has need keeps till it earns. That's 1 CP, but it's the unit automatically passes morale. So that's a cheaper auto pass morale as well. So you've still got access to your 2 CP auto pass from just the core kind of rules, and then you've got this one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little tricky because you have to do it at the end of your movement phase, so you don't do it in the morale. But it's if it's a unit which you're moving up to an objective and you say I have to hold this objective no matter what, it's worth putting on them because it means they're not going to have to worry about morale. They're able to put up a banner maybe and then shoot or something along those lines, or heroic intervention. That's an important one. You can combine those two. It doesn't break actions, and you get the 6-up Fiona Pain. So you can make a unit stand on an objective, be pretty hard to shift with this strat. You just got to plan a little bit ahead.
Nice, no, I like it, man. Cool. And then I think oh my god, 2 more pages of strats for these guys. But yeah, so probably don't need to go over that. Is there one? So you've already spoken about reactive reprisal. Is that where if they can, if you get shot at, you can shoot back?
Yep, and this can be really useful, especially if your opponent doesn't think about it appropriately, and maybe they take a couple chip shots with something that just to get value, and then you suddenly spend a CP and blast them back, or they expect to kill you with something and they just fluff the roll, and then you kill the unit back. It's can situationally be quite strong.
Yeah, cool. We've also got Bastion running, so that's your 1 CP, make a hecaton, act on top profile. Point blank fusillade, where you can fire into engagement range, so you can shoot in combat as well. And what else we've got? Yeah, so the combat surgery, that was one with the medic unit where you can bring D3 models back. We've spoken about shenanigans you can do with that as well. And then what else have we got? We've got, yeah, so the pan-spectral warning, 2 CP, that's the one where if a unit set up as reinforcements, you get to shoot at it, basically, so if it's within 12 inches, so the kind of standard one. Marines have this, I'm sure a lot of other armies have got this type of strat as well. And then you've already kind of touched on the multi-wave system jammer, and other things like that. So, wow, yeah, just such a huge suite of things that you can use, you can take into to make your guys just that much better.
Yeah, I think one of the stratagems I forgot to mention towards the beginning is this ancestral sentence stratagem. 1 CP, if a target has a judgment token, your Votann unit gets to reroll all hits against it, whether it's shooting or the fight phase. Um, Super strong. And that's really where the light 'em up stratagem really shines. Is you can set that up and say a unit that maybe you couldn't see or get a judgment token or your opponent's been being cagey with is exposed. Your bikes jump over, spend a CP, give them a judgment token, then your land fortress rolls up, spends another CP, and gets full rerolls hit with all of its weapons into that target.
Love it. Yeah, this is the one. Yeah, I was thinking in my head. I was like, I'm sure I've seen in battle reports the getting the full rerolls to hit on things like the land fortresses. So yeah, this is where we're getting that from. Awesome, fantastic, cool. So I think that pretty much wraps us up, Brian. So that was a very good kind of thorough chat of the Leagues of Votann. I can't wait to get these guys on the table myself. I know you've had a good few games online and obviously on TTS, so it's great to get those reps in also. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to. I've got a big wave of models incoming, so I'm hopefully to get them on the channel quite soon. In terms of final thoughts, what would you kind of, if you were kind of just wanting to just say your piece for Leagues of Votann for everybody out there, what would you like to say?
I think there's a lot of talk from a lot of people saying that after the nerfs, they're kind of dead. They're going to be a low tier army. As you mentioned, I've played a lot of games with them. I played them against strong players who know how to mitigate their rules as best they can, and they're still incredibly strong. They're beatable now with the nerfs. It used to be where you'd have to be incredibly lucky to have a chance. Now they're one of the best armies in the game, in my opinion. But they're an army which you can have a game against. So that's nice. I would just, it's cool models, cool rules. Be careful with your beam weapons. That's going to be tricky. Try and make sure you get that right. And if you're ever in question as a judge, that's probably going to be the part that's going to take the most getting used to do it properly. And I expect to be the one that people do wrong the most as well, and can also give a lot of feel bad. So be careful about that one.
Yeah, no, great point to make there as well. And yeah, you've clearly obviously been having a lot of fun with these guys. And yeah, as we start to see people actually bringing these to tournaments, well, I'm sure we'll get up to speed on all of the kind of nuances and intricacies with the army as well. And yeah, but I'm looking forward to seeing them, what kind of tournament results they can get, certainly. But yeah, cool, that's us. Perfect. So all that's left to do then is to say thanks. So thank you so much, Brian, for being on tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great talking.
No, it's been great chatting to you. So it's great just having you on. Obviously, you know your stuff. You've got good passion for the army. So it's been great to really pick your brains, and I will continue to do so privately. I'm sure you can tell me what lists to run, what models to get for Votann, and I can't wait. So thanks for that. Thank you also to the viewers as well. So thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed. If you have enjoyed, please again like and subscribe. Thank you to sponsors again, tabletopminis.co.uk. To Riath, he is the one sending me a good old wave of Votann models down. So thank you so much for that. And also thank you to our patrons for the channel as well. So without further ado, I think it's goodbye from me, DJ, your host, and Brian, do you want to sign off for the folks?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is a great podcast. Hope everyone keeps listening. Subscribe.
Thanks so much, man. Yep. And yeah, tune in next time and answer the call. And we'll see you guys next time. See you later.